Hello everyone, my name is Aaron and welcome to TotalBoardGame. Today we're going to be going over the rules of Axis and Allies 1941, a World War II strategy game. This game is a version of previous Axis and Allies, a couple in the background as you can see. I'm a big board game guy, and one of the things I like is reading over the rules and understanding new mechanisms that board games bring to the table. Literally. This game is fairly complex, the rule book is fairly thick, and I can't read this whole rule book without messing up a few times. So I actually had a robot voice read the rule book, and I'm doing mini video clips to explain each situation in the rule book as it's being read. So I apologize for the voice. I tried reading this through, didn't work out quite as well as I'd like. So you make sure you comment, tell me what you think. If you want me to do more board game rules, make sure you leave in the comments section and tell me which one I should do. This video took well over 30 hours to edit, so I threw in a couple of ads. If I missed something, let me know. If not, enjoy.
Axis and Allies. 1941. How the war is won. Up to 5 people can play the Axis and Allies 1941 game. Each player controls one or more world powers. The more territories you hold, the more weapons you can build and the more powerful those weapons can be. On the map are 5 national capitals: Washington, D.C., London, Moscow, Berlin, and Tokyo. The Allies begin the game controlling Washington, London, and Moscow. The Axis begin the game controlling Berlin and Tokyo. Capture 2 enemy capitals. If the Allies control Berlin and Tokyo at the end of the Japanese player's turn, they win the war. If the Axis control any 2 Allies capitals at the end of the United States player's turn, they win the war. Optional shorter game. Capture 1 enemy capital. If the Allies control either Berlin or Tokyo at the end of the Japanese player's turn, they win the war. If the Axis controls either Washington or London at the end of the United States player's turn, they win the war. 1 or more players take the side of the Axis, Germany and Japan, and 1 or more play the Allied Soviet Union, United Kingdom, and United States. In a 5-player game, each player controls 1 world power. If fewer people play, some will control more than 1 power. If a player controls more than 1 power, those powers must all be on the same side. Axis for Allies. If you control more than 1 power, keep track of those powers' income and units separately. You can conduct operations for only 1 power at a time. Setup. Once you have decided who will play which power, set up the game for play. Take the plastic pieces that represent your power's combat units. Each power is color-coded as shown in the following table, which also shows the power's starting income level and treasury in industrial production credits IPCs. Soviet Union 7 maroon, Germany 12 grape, United Kingdom 12 tan, Japan 9 orange, United States 15 green. National controlled markers. National controlled markers indicate status in the game. They mark conquered territories and indicate national production levels. Take all of the national controlled markers that belong to your power printed with its emblem. National production chart. This chart tracks each power's national production level income during the game. It is located along the top edge of the game board. The level is based on the total of the industrial production credit IPC values of each territory the power controls. Place one of your controlled markers on the number on the chart that matches your power's starting income on the table above. This is the power's starting national production level. Each player should keep track of his or her power's production level separately. Mobilization zone. The mobilization zone, located on the game board, includes a chart that shows each unit's cost in IPCs, as well as its move, attack, and defense values. Newly purchased units are placed here until they are mobilized. Industrial production credits. These units are the money of the game, representing capacity for military production. Each power has a beginning national production level, shown as starting income on the table on page 6. Each power also begins the game with that many IPCs to spend on its first turn. Have 1 player act as a banker and track each power's IPC total on a piece of paper, for use another means agreed upon by your group. Setup charts. The back page of this rulebook shows setup charts for each power. Each shows the name of the power, its starting IPCs, its unit's color, and its emblem. It also lists the starting numbers and locations on the game board for the powers units. Place all of the indicated units on the game board as listed. C units are listed along with their numbered C zones. Place the listed C units in the corresponding C zones. Unit stacking counters. Use these cardboard counters to save space in overcrowded territories and C zones. Gray counters represent 1 combat unit each, green counters represent 3 units each, and red counters represent 5 units each. For example, if you wanted to place 10 infantry on a space, you would stack up 1 red counter, 1 green counter, and 1 gray counter, with 1 infantry unit on top. If you do not have enough pieces to top off all your stacks, simply use any identifying item. The number of stacks is not limited by the number of plastic miniatures and counters available. Battle Strip, Casualty Strip, and Dice. The Battle Strip is a card with columns that list attacking and defending units and their combat strengths. When combat occurs, the players involved place their units on both sides of the battle strip. Resolve combat by rolling dice. Units chosen as casualties, that is, destroyed in combat, are moved behind the casualty strip. Game board. The game board is a map of the world, circa 1941. It is divided into spaces, either territories on land or sea zones, separated by border lines. Spaces on the game board. The border colors of the territories on the game board show which power controls them at the start of the game. Each power has its own color and emblem. The original controller of a territory is the power whose emblem is printed on that territory. All other spaces are neutral and are not aligned with any power. Most territories have an income value ranging from 1 to 6. This is the number of IPCs they produce each turn for their controller. Many territories, such as Gibraltar, have no income value. Units can move between adjacent spaces, those that share a common border. The game board wraps around horizontally. Territories and sea zones on the right edge of the board are adjacent to territories and sea zones on the left edge. The top and bottom edges of the board do not wrap around. Adjacent territories: Western Canada to Eastern Canada, Western United States to Eastern United States, Mexico to East Mexico. Adjacent sea zones: 35 to 21, 36 to 20, 41 to 19. Territories exist in one of 3 conditions: friendly, hostile, or neutral. Friendly, controlled by you or a friendly powered one on your side. Hostile, controlled by an enemy powered one on the opposing side. Neutral, not controlled by any power. Control of neutral territories never changes. Sea zones are either friendly or hostile. Friendly, contains no enemy surface warships. Surface warships do not include transports or submarines. Hostile, contains enemy surface warships. Neutral territories such as Turkey, Mongolia, or Sahara do not have any powers emblem printed on them. They represent areas that are impassable for political or geographical reasons. You cannot attack these territories, move through them, or move over them with their units. Neutral territories do not have income values. Turkish Straits. In order to maintain its neutrality, Turkey closed the narrow straits linking the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, permitting no naval passage by any belligerent nation on either side. Sea units cannot move into or out of Sea Zone 18. However, air units can move over this sea zone freely. Finales. The game board has 2 finales, artificial waterways that connect to larger bodies of water. The Panama Finale, located in Central America, connects the Pacific Ocean Sea Zone 19 to the Atlantic Ocean Sea Zone 12, while the Suez Finale connects the Mediterranean Sea Zone 17 to the Indian Ocean Sea Zone 28. A finale is not considered a space, so it does not block land movement. Land units can move freely between Middle East and Anglo-Egypt Sudan. Central America, split by the Panama Finale, is one territory and requires no extra land movement to cross the finale. If you want to move sea units through a finale, your side but not necessarily your power must control it at the start of your turn, that is, you cannot use it the turn it is captured. The side that controls Central America controls the Panama Finale. The side that controls both Anglo-Egypt Sudan and Middle East controls the Suez Finale. If one side controls Anglo-Egypt Sudan and the other controls Middle East, the Suez Finale is closed to sea units. The movement of air units is unaffected by finales. They can pass between sea zones connected by the canal regardless of which side controls it. Islands. An island or island group is a territory located entirely inside one sea zone. A sea zone can contain more than one island or island group, but each is considered one territory with its own name and national emblem. You cannot split up land-based units so that they are on different islands in the same group. Order of play. Axis and Allies, 1941 is played in rounds. During a round, each power takes a turn, in order. At the end of each round, check to see if any side has won the game. Order of play. 1. Soviet Union 2. Germany 3. United Kingdom 4. Japan 5. United States. Your power's turn consists of 6 phases, which take place in a fixed sequence. You must collect income if you can, but all other parts of the turn sequence are voluntary. When you finish your collect income phase, your turn is over. Play then passes to the next power in the turn order. When every power has completed one turn, the round ends. If no side has won, a new round begins. 1. Purchase units 2. Combat move 3. Conduct combat 4. Non-combat move 5. Mobilize new units 6. Collect income. Phase 1. Purchase units. In this phase, you can spend IPCs to purchase additional units for use in future turns. The mobilization zone printed on the game board lists units available and their cost. You can also check unit profiles on page 22. Purchase units sequence. 1. Order units 2. Pay for units 3. Place units in mobilization zone. Step 1. Order units. You can purchase as many units of any type as you can afford, but you must choose all the units you wish to purchase during this phase. You don't have to spend all of your IPCs. Step 2. Pay for units. Pay IPCs to the bank equal to the total cost of the units purchased. Have a banker adjust the number of IPCs in your power's treasury. Step 3. Place units in the mobilization zone. Place the newly purchased units in the mobilization zone on the game board. You cannot use these units right away. You will deploy them later in the turn in the Mobilize New Units phase. Phase 2. Combat Move. The Axis and Allies, 1941 game has 2 distinct movement phases, combat and non-combat. During the combat move phase, all movement must result in combat, with a few exceptions. Movement of units that does not result in combat occurs during the non-combat move phase. Phase 4. At no time can an ally's power attack another ally's power, or an Axis power attack another Axis power. In this phase, you can move any or all of your units into hostile spaces. Each unit can move a number of spaces up to its move value. Units can move from more than one space to attack a single enemy space, as long as each unit is able to reach that space with a legal move. Most units must stop when they enter the hostile space. Thus, the unit with a move value of 2 could move into a friendly space and then a hostile space, or just into a hostile space. Units can move freely through friendly spaces en route to hostile spaces during this phase. However, units cannot end their movement in friendly spaces during the combat move phase except in 4 instances. Tanks that have blitzed through an unoccupied hostile space. Sea units that will be participating in an amphibious assault from an uncontested sea zone. Sea units moving from a hostile sea zone to escape combat as their combat move. Sea units moving into a sea zone containing only enemy submarines and /or transports in order to attack those units. Remember that such a sea zone is not considered hostile. Movement into a hostile territory counts as a combat movement, whether that space is occupied or not. Remember, units cannot move into neutral territories. If you move all of your units out of a territory you control, you still retain control of that territory until an enemy moves into and captures it. The territory remains in the control of the power that controlled it at the start of the turn. Units from the same side can freely share territories, sea zones, and space on aircraft carriers and transports with one another as long as both powers agree. All combat movement is considered to take place at the same time. Thus, you cannot move the unit, then conduct combat, then move the unit again during this phase. The only exception to this is an amphibious assault that is preceded by a sea battle, since the transported land units must offload after the sea battle is successfully completed. You cannot move additional units into an embattled space once an attack has begun. Enemy submarines and /or transports do not block any of your unit's movement, nor do they prevent loading or offloading in that sea zone, with one exception. As the moving player, you have the option of attacking an enemy submarine and /or transport that shares a sea zone with you. However, if a warship destroys a submarine and /or transport, that warship must end its movement in that sea zone. It is possible for some units to stop an attack while others continue moving through the sea zone. Sea units starting in hostile sea zones. At the beginning of the combat move phase, you might already have sea units and /or fighters on carriers in spaces containing enemy units that were there at the start of your turn. For example, an enemy might have mobilized new surface warships in a sea zone where you have sea units. When your turn comes around again, you are sharing that sea zone with enemy forces. If your sea units are sharing a sea zone with enemy surface warships, not submarines and /or transports, this situation requires you to take one of the following actions. Remain in the sea zone and conduct combat. Leave the sea zone, load units if desired, and conduct combat elsewhere. Leave the sea zone, load units, and return to the same sea zone to conduct combat. You cannot load units while in a hostile sea zone. Leave the sea zone and conduct no combat. Once these sea units have moved and /or participated in combat, they cannot move or participate in the non-combat move phase of the turn. Air units. Each air unit that moves in the combat move phase must generally reserve part of its move value for the non-combat move phase, when it must return to a safe landing place using its remaining movement. An air unit's movement in any complete turn is limited to its total move value. For example, a bomber has move 6, but it cannot move 6 spaces to end its movement in a hostile space. It must save enough movement points to get to a friendly territory where it can land. The fighter can move up to its full move value of 4 to attack in a sea zone, but only if a carrier could be there for it to land on by the end of the Mobilize new units phase. Amphibious assaults. If you want to make any amphibious assaults, you must announce your intent to do so during the combat move phase. During the conduct combat phase, you can launch only those amphibious assaults that you announced during this phase. An amphibious assault takes place when you attack the coastal territory, the territory bordering a sea zone or island group, from a sea zone by offloading land units from transports into that target territory, or make a joint attack with both offloading units and other units from one or more neighboring territories. The sea zone can be friendly or hostile, but if it is hostile, it must be made friendly through sea combat before the amphibious assault can commence. Moving transports and their cargo into a sea zone from which you plan to make an amphibious assault counts as a combat move, even if there are no defending surface warships there. If an amphibious assault involves a sea combat and air units are involved, the attacker must assign each air unit to either the sea zone or the territory being attacked. During the conduct combat phase, those air units participate in combat only in the space to which they were assigned. Special combat movement. The number of units can make special moves during this phase. These are described in detail below. Aircraft carriers. Any fighters being carried on an aircraft carrier launch before the carrier moves and move independently of the carrier. These fighters can make a combat move from the carrier's sea zone, or they can remain in the sea zone until the non-combat move phase. Fighters belonging to a friendly power on board another power's carrier. Guest fighters must remain on board as cargo if the carrier moves in this phase. They cannot take part in combat and are destroyed if the carrier is destroyed. Whether it moves during the combat move or non-combat move phase, an aircraft carrier allows friendly fighters to land on it in the sea zone where it finishes its move. Submarines. Submarines are capable of moving undetected due to their ability to submerge and thus have special movement rules. If there are no enemy destroyers present, the submarine can move through a sea zone containing enemy warships without stopping. However, If a submarine enters a sea zone containing an enemy destroyer during the combat move phase, its movement ends immediately and combat will result. Tanks and blitzing. The tank can blitz by moving through an unoccupied hostile territory as the first part of a move that can end in a friendly or hostile territory. Place your controlled marker on the first territory. The tank establishes control of the first territory before it moves to the next. Blitzing tanks must complete their move during the combat move phase, and adjust the national production levels as you blitz. The tank that encounters enemy units including an industrial complex in the first territory it enters must stop there. Transports. If a transport encounters hostile surface warships not enemy submarines and / or transports after it begins to move not counting the sea zone it started in, its movement for that turn ends, it must stop in that sea zone and conduct sea combat. A transport can't load units while in any friendly sea zone along its route, including the sea zone it started in. If a transport loads land units during the combat move phase, it must offload those units to attack a hostile territory as part of an amphibious assault during the conduct combat phase, or it must retreat during the sea combat step of the amphibious assault sequence while attempting to do so. A transport that is part of an amphibious assault must end its movement in a friendly sea zone from which it can conduct the assault. It can also end its movement in a hostile sea zone that could become friendly as a result of sea combat. However, a transport cannot ignore enemy submarines to offload land units for an amphibious assault unless at least one warship belonging to the attacking power is also present in the sea zone at the end of the combat move phase. Any land units aboard a transport are considered cargo until they offload. Cargo cannot take part in sea combat and is destroyed if the transport is destroyed. Multinational forces. Units on the same side can share a territory or sea zone, constituting a multinational force. Such forces can defend together, but they cannot attack together. This does not mean powers can't share income. Only the power that controls the territory collects income for that territory. Attacking. A multinational force cannot attack the same space together, because each power moves and attacks with its own units only on its player's turn. In a sea zone where a battle occurs, any units that belong to a friendly power other than cargo on an attacker's ship cannot participate in the battle in any way. Such units cannot be chosen as casualties in the sea combat and have no effect on any defending submarines. An attacking fighter can launch from an aircraft carrier owned by a friendly power, but that carrier cannot move until its controller's turn. Similarly, an attacking carrier can carry a friendly power's fighter as cargo, but the fighter cannot participate in an attack by that carrier. An attacking land unit can assault the coastal territory from a friendly power's transport, but only on the turn of the attacking land unit's owner. Defending. When a space containing a multinational force is attacked, all units in that space defend together. If the defending units belong to powers under the control of different players, those players mutually determine the casualties. If they cannot agree, the attacker chooses. Transporting. Transports belonging to a friendly power can load and offload your land units. This is a three-step process. You load your land units aboard the friendly transport on your turn. The transport's controller moves it or not on that player's turn. You offload your land units on your next turn. Phase 3. Conduct combat. In this phase, you fight out battles in all spaces that contain your units and enemy units. You conduct certain kinds of combat in a specific sequence. 1. Amphibious assaults. 2. General combat. The number of units have special rules that modify or overwrite the general combat rules in this section. See unit profiles on page 22 for special combat rules associated with each type of unit. 1. Amphibious assaults. During this step you resolve each amphibious assault you announced during the combat move phase. If you did not announce any amphibious assaults, go to the general combat step. Amphibious assault sequence. 1. Sea combat. 2. Land combat. Step 1. Sea combat. If there are defending surface warships in the sea zone where you are offloading units from transports, sea combat occurs. If there are only defending submarines and / or transports, you can choose to ignore those units or conduct sea combat. Destroying defenseless enemy transports counts as sea combat. If sea combat occurs, all attacking and defending sea units present must participate in the battle. Conduct the sea combat using the rules for general combat. Then go to Step 2 Land Combat. If no sea combat occurs, go directly to Step 2. Step 2 Land Combat. Land combat can take place only if there was no sea battle or the sea zone has been cleared of all defending enemy units except transports and submerged submarines. If the attacker has surviving land units committed to assaulting the territory, move all attacking and defending land and air units to the battle strip and conduct combat using the general combat rules. Attacking land units can come from transports seaborne as well as from other territories that are adjacent to the attacked territory overland. A single transport can offload land units only into a single territory. If no seaborne land units survive the sea combat, or if the attacking sea units retreated from the sea combat, then any other units that were designated to participate in the land attack including air units must still conduct one round of land combat in the intended hostile territories before they can retreat. If the attacker does not have any attacking land or air units left, the amphibious assault is over. Order of play. Retreats. Keep the attacking overland and seaborne land units separated on the battle strip. Attacking seaborne units cannot retreat. Attacking overland units and aircraft can retreat as normal at the end of any round of combat. All attacking overland units must retreat together as a group, at the same time and to the same place. They can retreat only to where at least one of those units moved from. Attacking air units, whether involved in the sea combat or the attack on the territory, can retreat as normal. Air units and overland units if any must retreat at the same time. However, the air units do not land until the non-combat move phase. Air units. Each attacking air unit can participate in either the sea battle or the land battle. It cannot do both. The attacking player must declare which air units are involved in each part of the attack during the combat move phase and cannot change their assignments later. At the end of the amphibious assault, all air units remain in place. They will land during the non-combat move phase. Air units defending in a territory can fight only in that territory. They cannot participate in the sea combat. General combat. In this step, you resolve combat in each space that contains your units and enemy units. Combat follows the general combat sequence described below. Combat in each space takes place at the same time, but you resolve combat in each affected territory or sea zone separately and completely before resolving combat in the next contested space. The attacker decides the order of spaces in which each combat occurs. No new units can enter as reinforcements once combat has begun. If you moved any land units into hostile territories that are unoccupied or that contain only industrial complexes, you do not resolve combat. Simply skip to Step 7. Conclude combat for each of these territories. Attacking and defending units in each space are considered to fire at the same time, but for ease of play you roll dice in sequence, attacker first, then defender. General combat sequence. Combat takes place over a number of rounds. Each battle round consists of several steps. 1. Place units along the battle strip. 2. Submarine surprise strike or submerged sea battles only. 3. Attacking units fire. 4. Defending units fire. 5. Remove defenders' casualties. 6. Press attack or retreat. 7. Conclude combat. Step 1. Place units along the battle strip. The battle strip has two sides, labeled attacker and defender. Place all the attacking and defending units from the combat onto their respective sides, aligned with the numbered columns that contain those units' names. The number in the units column identifies the unit's attack or defense value. Industrial complexes don't participate in combat. An attacking or defending unit must roll its column's attack or defense value or lower to score the hit. In a sea battle involving transports or aircraft carriers, place any cargo, whether your own or a friendly powers, beside the sea unit that is carrying it. Cargo does not roll attacks, nor can it be chosen as a casualty. It is lost with the sea unit carrying it if that sea unit is destroyed. If you are attacking in a sea zone that already contained friendly units, those friendly units are not placed along the battle strip. They remain out of play for this turn. Step 2. Submarine surprise strike or submerged sea battles only. This step is specific to attacking and defending submarines. Before the general sea battle takes place. Steps 3-5 Both attacking and defending submarines choose to either make a surprise strike die roll or submerge. However, if your opponent has a destroyer in the battle, your attacking or defending submarines cannot submerge or make a surprise strike. Combat proceeds normally, and your submarines fire along with your other units in Step 3 or 4. Submerge. Attacking or defending submarines that choose to submerge are immediately removed from the battle strip and returned to the game board in the contested sea zone, removing them from the rest of that sea battle. Players on both sides have to decide whether attacking and defending submarines will fire or submerge before rolling any dice. The attacking player decides first. Surprise strike. Each attacking submarine conducting a surprise strike rolls 1 die, scoring the hit on a roll of 2 or less. After the attacker has rolled for all attacking submarines, the defender chooses 1 sea unit for each hit scored and moves it behind the casualty strip. Submarines cannot hit air units. Then each defending submarine conducting a surprise strike rolls 1 die, scoring the hit on a roll of 1. After the defender has rolled for all defending submarines, the attacker chooses 1 sea unit for each hit scored and removes it from play. Once all surprise strike rolls have been made, remove the defender's casualties. This step is over for this round of combat. Repeat this step during each round of combat as long as there are attacking and/or defending submarines and no opposing destroyers. Any hits made during this step that do not destroy units such as battleships remain in effect until the end of the combat. Note: in both cases, attacking or defending, transports can be chosen as casualties only if there are no other eligible units. You cannot choose submerged submarines as casualties since they have been removed from the battle. Step 3. Attacking units fire. This step takes place in both land and sea battles. The attacking player rolls 1 die for each attacking unit with an attack value that did not fire or submerge in Step 2. Roll for units with the same attack value at the same time. For example, all units with attack 3 roll together. An attacking unit scores the hit if you roll its attack value or less. After the attacking player has rolled for all attacking units, the defender chooses 1 unit for each hit scored and moves it behind the casualty strip. Units behind the casualty strip will return fire in Step 4. The defending player has to assign as many hits as possible. For example, if a destroyer and 2 submarines attack the destroyer and carrier with a fighter and score 3 hits, the defender must assign a hit from the attacking destroyer to the fighter and the submarine hits to the ships. The defender cannot assign the destroyer hit to a ship because submarines cannot hit air units, so 1 hit from the submarine would be lost. Step 4. Defending units fire. This step takes place in both land and sea battles. As with attacking units, defending units roll 1 die for each unit with a defense value that did not fire or submerge in Step 2. These include units that were moved behind the casualty strip in Step 3. Roll for units with the same defense value at the same time. The defending unit scores the hit if you roll its defense value or less. After the defender has rolled for all defending units with a defense value, the attacker chooses 1 unit for each hit scored and removes it from play. As in Step 3, the attacker must assign as many hits as possible. Specific to sea battles, in both Steps 3 and 4, submarines that fired in Step 2 cannot fire again during the same combat round. If there is an enemy destroyer in the battle, submarines fire in Step 3 or 4 rather than Step 2. Remember that in sea battles, hits from air units cannot be assigned to submarines unless there is a destroyer that is friendly to the air units in the battle, and hits can be assigned to transports only if there are no other eligible units. Step 5. Remove defenders' casualties. This step takes place in both land and sea battles. Remove from play any of the defender's units that are behind the casualty strip. After casualties are removed, it might be necessary to re-evaluate certain units' capabilities that depend on the presence or absence of other units. For example, submarines might no longer have their abilities cancelled by enemy destroyers that have been destroyed. Any such changes will take effect in the following combat round. Step 6. Press attack or retreat. Continue fighting combat rounds Steps 2 through 5 until one of the following 2 conditions occurs in this order. Condition: the attacker and/or defender loses all units. Once all units that can either fire or retreat on one or both sides have been destroyed, the combat ends. If a power has combat units remaining along the battle strip, that power wins the combat. In a sea battle, if both sides have only transports remaining, the attacker's transports can remain in the contested sea zone or retreat, if possible. See condition B below. Condition: the attacker retreats. The attacker never the defender can retreat during this step. Land and sea units. Move all attacking land and sea units in that combat that are along the battle strip to a single adjacent friendly space from which at least one of the attacking land or sea units moved. In the case of sea units, that space must have been friendly at the start of the turn. All such units must retreat together to the same space, regardless of where they came from. Air units. Retreating air units remain in the contested space temporarily. They complete their retreat movement during the non-combat move phase using the same rules as air units involved in a successful battle. Step 7. Conclude combat. Return all units remaining along the battle strip to the contested space on the game board. If you win a combat as the attacker in a territory and you have one or more surviving land units there, you take control of capture it. Otherwise, it remains under the defender's control. If all units on both sides were destroyed, the territory remains under the defender's control. Sea units cannot capture a territory, they must stay at sea. Air units cannot capture a territory. If your attack force has only air units remaining, they cannot occupy the territory you attacked, even if there are no enemy units remaining. Air units must return to a friendly territory or carrier during the non-combat move phase. Until then, they stay in the space where they fought. Place your controlled marker on the newly captured territory. An industrial complex located in the captured territory now belongs to your side. If you capture an industrial complex, you cannot mobilize new units there until your next turn, and adjust the national production levels. Your national production increases by the value of the captured territory, the loser's production decreases by the same amount. Liberating a territory. If you capture a territory that was originally controlled by another power on your side, you liberate the territory. You do not take control of it. Instead, the original controller regains the territory and adjusts that power's national production level accordingly. Any industrial complex in that territory reverts to the original controller of the territory. If the original controller's capital is in enemy hands at the end of the turn in which you would otherwise have liberated the territory, you capture the territory instead. You adjust your national production level instead of that power's, and you can use any industrial complex there until the original controller's capital is liberated. Capturing and liberating capitals. If you capture a territory containing an enemy capital, Washington, Moscow, London, Berlin, or Tokyo, follow the same rules as for capturing the territory above. Add the captured territory's income value to your national production level. In addition, you collect all unspent IPCs from the treasury of the original controller of the captured capital. For example, if Germany captures Moscow while the Soviet Union's player is holding 6 IPCs, those IPCs are immediately transferred to Germany's player. You collect these IPCs even if your own capital is in enemy hands. The original controller of the captured capital is still in the game but cannot collect income from any territories he or she still controls and cannot purchase new units. The player skips all but the combat move, conduct combat, and non-combat move phases of the turn until that capital is liberated. If that power or one on its side liberates the capital, the original controller can once again collect income, including from territories reverting control to that power. If a capital is liberated, ownership of the industrial complex in that capital's territory reverts to the original controller. Other territories and industrial complexes that were originally controlled by the newly liberated capital's controller but are currently in the hands of friendly powers also revert control. You do not collect IPCs from the controlling power when you liberate a capital. For example, if the United Kingdom's player takes Moscow from Germany, Germany's player does not surrender any IPCs. Phase 4. Non-combat move. In this phase, you can move any of your units that did not move in the combat move phase or participate in combat during your turn. You now also land all your air units that participated in and survived the conduct combat phase. This is a good time to gather your units, either to fortify vulnerable territories or to reinforce units at the front. Just as in the combat move phase, each of your land and sea units can move a number of spaces up to its move value. Each of your air units can move a number of spaces up to its move value. less the number of spaces it moved during the combat move phase if any. Air units that did not move at all during the combat move phase can use their entire movement allowance in this phase. However, stranded defending fighters have to attempt to land before you conduct any of your non-combat movement. Where units can move, certain restrictions apply to where various kinds of units can move during this phase. In general, units cannot move through or into hostile spaces during non-combat movement. Air units and submarines can move through hostile spaces during this phase. However, land units, a land unit can move into any friendly territory, including those that were captured in the current turn. It cannot move into or through a hostile territory, not even one that contains no combat units but is enemy controlled. Air units, an air unit must end its move in an eligible safe landing place. Bombers and fighters can land in any territory that was friendly at the start of your turn. A territory you just captured this turn isn't eligible for landing. Air units that cannot move to a safe landing place by the end of the non-combat move phase are destroyed. This includes stranded defending fighters. Carrier landings, only fighters can land in a sear zone, and only if a friendly aircraft carrier is present. The carrier must have available space for the fighter to land. Bombers can't never land on carriers. A few other rules apply to this situation. The fighter can land in a sear zone, even the hostile one that is adjacent to an industrial complex you control, but only if you will be mobilizing an aircraft carrier that you previously purchased in that zone during the Mobilize New Units phase. In order for a fighter to land on a carrier, both units must end their movement in the same sea zone. You must have a carrier move, remain in place, or be mobilized new carriers only to pick up a fighter that would end its non-combat movement in a sea zone. You cannot deliberately move an air unit out of range of a potential safe landing space. Stranded defending fighters also have to land during this phase. These are carrier-based fighters whose aircraft carrier has been destroyed in combat. They are allowed to move up to one space to find the friendly territory or carrier on which to land. If no landing space is available, they are removed from play. This movement occurs before the acting player makes any non-combat moves. Sea units, the sea unit can move through any friendly sea zone. It cannot enter the hostile sea zone during this phase. Submarines, unlike other sea units, submarines can move through and even into hostile sea zones during this phase. However, the submarine must end its movement when it enters a sea zone containing one or more enemy destroyers. Transports can move to friendly coastal territories and load or offload cargo. However, they cannot do so if they loaded, moved, offloaded, or were involved in combat during the combat move or conduct combat phase. Aircraft carriers can move to sea zones to allow friendly fighters to land. They must move their range permitting. If they did not move in the combat move phase and the friendly sea zone is the only safe landing place for the fighters, an aircraft carrier and a fighter must both end their moves in the same sea zone in order for the fighter to land on the carrier. Phase 5, Mobilize New Units. In this phase, you move newly purchased units from the mobilization zone on the game board to eligible spaces. An eligible industrial complex is one that you have controlled since the start of your turn. You cannot use industrial complexes that you captured this turn. You can't never use an industrial complex controlled by a friendly power. Each eligible industrial complex can mobilize only as many units as the IPC value of the territory containing it. This limit includes units mobilized in sea zones adjacent to the industrial complex. For example, the industrial complex in Germany can mobilize up to 4 units, either in that territory or in Sea Zone 5. Restrictions on placement. Place new land units and bombers only in territories containing eligible industrial complexes. Land units cannot enter play on transports. Place sea units only in sea zones adjacent to territories containing eligible industrial complexes. New sea units can interplay even in a hostile sea zone. No combat occurs because the conduct combat phase is over. Place fighters either in territories containing eligible industrial complexes, or on your aircraft carriers in sea zones, even hostile ones adjacent to such territories. You can even place new fighters on an aircraft carrier currently being mobilized. However, you cannot place a new fighter on a carrier owned by a friendly power. If you declared your intention to mobilize a new carrier in a specific sea zone to provide a safe landing place for a fighter, you must do so unless the fighter has landed safely elsewhere or has been destroyed. In the event that you purchase more units than you can actually mobilize due to production limitations, you must return the excess units of your choice to the box. The cost of the excess units is reimbursed to you. Phase 6. Collect income. In this phase, you earn income to finance future attacks and strategies. Look up your power's national production level indicated by your controlled marker on the national production chart and collect that number of IPCs from the bank. Have the banker record the change in the total number of IPCs in your treasury. If your capital is under an enemy power's control, you cannot collect income. The power cannot lend or give IPCs to another power, even if both powers are on the same side. Unit profiles. This section provides detailed information for each unit in the game. Each entry includes the unit's name, its silhouette, a brief description, and a quick statistical reference for the unit, its cost in IPCs, its attack and defense values, and its move number. Each unit type also has unit characteristics, which are summarized below its statistics. Land units, infantry, tanks, and industrial complexes are land units. Infantry and tanks can attack and defend only in territories. Infantry and tanks can capture hostile territories. Infantry, cost, 3, attack, 1, defense, 2, move, 1, unit characteristics, a low-cost basic land unit. Infantry is particularly effective on defense. Tanks, cost, 6, attack, 3, defense, 3, move, 2, unit characteristics, blitz. Tanks can blitz by moving through an unoccupied hostile territory as the first part of a two-space move that can end in a friendly or hostile territory. This complete move must occur during the combat move phase. By blitzing, the tank establishes control of the first territory before it moves to the next. The second territory can be friendly or hostile, or even the space the tank came from. The tank cannot blitz through a territory that contains an enemy unit, even if the unit is an industrial complex. Industrial complexes silhouette printed on map cost, not applicable, attack, not applicable, defense, not applicable, move, not applicable, unit characteristics. An industrial complex cannot attack, defend, or move, subject to capture. If a territory is captured, an industrial complex there is also captured. The capturing player can use it on the turn after it is captured. Air units, fighters and bombers are air units. Both can attack and defend in territories, and both can attack in sea zones. Fighters stationed on carriers can defend in sea zones. Air units can move through hostile territories and sea zones as if they were friendly. Air units can land only in friendly territories or in the case of fighters on friendly aircraft carriers. Your air units cannot land in territories you just captured, whether they were involved in the combat or not. Air units can hit submarines only if a friendly destroyer is participating in the combat. Air units can move during both the combat move and the non-combat move phases, up to a combined total of their move values. Flying range. To determine range, count each space your air unit enters after takeoff. When moving over water from a coastal territory or an island group, count the first sea zone entered as one space. When flying to an island group, count the surrounding sea zone and the island group itself as one space each. An island is considered a territory within a sea zone. Air units based on an island cannot defend the surrounding sea zone. When moving the fighter from a carrier, do not count the carrier's sea zone as the first space your fighter is in that sea zone already. In other words, each time an air unit crosses a boundary between spaces, whether territories or sea zones, it uses one movement point. To participate in combat, the fighter must take off from its carrier before the carrier moves, otherwise it is cargo. You cannot deliberately move air units into combat situations that place them out of range of a potential safe landing place. During the combat move phase, before conducting any combat, you must demonstrate some possible way however remote the possibility is for all your attacking air units to land safely that turn. This could include a combination of combat moves. It could also include non-combat moves by a carrier or the mobilization of a new carrier. If it does include the non-combat move by a carrier, then the carrier cannot move in the combat move phase. You cannot, however, Use a planned retreat of any carrier to demonstrate a possible safe landing place for any fighters. Once you have demonstrated possible safe landing places, you have no obligation to guarantee they will exist after combat begins. For example, aircraft carriers can freely retreat or be chosen as casualties, even if doing so leaves fighters with no place to land after combat. Such fighters will be destroyed at the end of the non-combat move phase. However, during the non-combat move and mobilize new units phases, you must provide for safe landing of as many surviving air units as possible. If you declared that a carrier will move during the non-combat move phase to provide a safe landing place for a fighter moved in the combat move phase, you must follow through and move the carrier to its planned location in the non-combat move phase. The only exceptions are if the fighter has landed safely elsewhere or has been destroyed before then, or a combat required to clear an intervening sea zone failed to do so. Likewise, if you declared that a new carrier will be mobilized to provide a safe landing place for a fighter, it must be mobilized in that sea zone unless the fighter has landed safely elsewhere or has been destroyed. Fighters, cost, 10, attack, 3, defense, 4, move, 4, unit characteristics. Land on aircraft carriers. Fighters can be carried by aircraft carriers. Up to 2 fighters can be on a friendly aircraft carrier at a time. The fighters must be launched from the carrier's initial position to participate in combat this turn. However, it can't land on a carrier in the non-combat move phase even if retreating or during any other non-combat move. The fighter cannot land on a carrier during the carrier's movement. Your aircraft carrier can move to a sea zone where one of your fighters has ended its move, and in fact, it must do so if it is able, but cannot move any farther that turn. The fighter based on a defending carrier must land on the same carrier if possible after the battle. If that carrier is destroyed in combat, the fighter must try to land elsewhere. It must land on a different friendly carrier in the same sea zone, move one space to a friendly territory, island, or aircraft carrier, or be destroyed. This movement occurs during the non-combat move phase, before the acting player makes any non-combat moves. Carrier-based fighters are always considered to be defending in the air, even if only submarines are attacking. Each of your fighters based on your attacking carrier launches before combat even if it is not participating in combat and can retreat to a friendly territory, island, or carrier within range if it survives combat. If any fighter is not in a safe landing place by the end of the non-combat move phase, it is destroyed. A safe landing place can include a sea zone in which a new carrier will be placed in the mobilize new units phase, as long as there is space available on it. Bombers, cost, 12, attack, 4, defense, 1, move, 6, unit characteristics. These are powerful long-range units with low defensive capability. Sea units, battleships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and transports are all sea units. They all move, attack, and defend in sea zones. They cannot move into territories. For the purpose of these rules, the following are surface warships, battleships, carriers, and destroyers. Submarines are warships, but they are not surface warships. Transports are not warships. All sea units can move up to 2 sea zones. They cannot move through hostile sea zones. As soon as they move into a hostile sea zone, they must end their movement and conduct combat. Submarines are an exception. They can pass through a hostile sea zone without stopping, unless there is an enemy destroyer present. See page 26. Some sea units can carry other units. Transports can carry only land units. Aircraft carriers can carry only fighters. Battleships, cost, 16, attack, 4, defense, 4, move, 2, unit characteristics. 2 hits to destroy. Attacking and defending battleships require 2 hits to destroy. If a battleship is hit once, even by 8 submarines surprise strike, turn it on its side to mark its damaged status. In the case of a defending battleship, do not move it behind the casualty strip unless it takes a second hit in the same combat. If a battleship survives a combat after taking 1 hit, return it upright to the game board. Aircraft carriers, cost, 12, attack, 1, defense, 2, move, 2, unit characteristics, carry fighters, An aircraft carrier can carry up to 2 fighters, including those belonging to friendly powers. Fighters belonging to friendly powers on attacking carriers are always treated as cargo, because it is not their turn. Fighters from friendly powers can take off from and land on your carriers, but only during that power's turn. Any fighters belonging to the aircraft carrier's owner move independently of the carrier. These fighters can make a combat move from the carrier's original sea zone, or they can remain in the original sea zone until the non-combat move phase. Your aircraft carrier can move to or remain in a sea zone where one of your fighters will end its non-combat move, and in fact, it must do so if it is able. Fighter defense. Whenever a carrier is attacked, its fighters, even those belonging to friendly powers, are considered to be defending in the air and fight normally, even if only submarines are attacking. However, the fighter cannot be chosen as a casualty from a submarine hit, because submarines can attack only sea units. Destroyers. Cost. 8. Attack. 2. Defense. 2. Move. 2. Unit characteristics. Anti-submarine. Destroyers are specially equipped for anti-submarine warfare. As a result, they can cancel many of the unit characteristics of enemy submarines. The destroyer cancels the treat hostile sea zones as friendly unit characteristic of any enemy submarine that moves into the sea zone with it. The submarine must immediately end its movement, whether combat or non-combat, upon entering the sea zone. If a submarine ends its combat movement in a sea zone with an enemy destroyer, combat will result. If a destroyer is in a battle, it cancels the following unit characteristics of all enemy submarines in that battle: surprise strike, submersible, and cannot be hit by air units. However, destroyers belonging to a power friendly to the attacker that happen to be in the same sea zone do not participate in the battle, therefore, they do not cancel any of these characteristics of defending submarines. Submarines. Cost. 6. Attack. 2. Defense. 1. Move. 2. Unit characteristics. Most unit characteristics of submarines are cancelled by the presence of an enemy destroyer. Surprise strike. Both attacking and defending submarines can make a surprise strike, firing before any other units fire in a sea battle. As detailed in Step 2 of the General Combat Sequence, submarines make their rolls before any other units, unless an enemy destroyer is present. If neither side is eligible for a surprise strike, there is no Step 2. Players move directly to Step 3 of the General Combat Sequence, Submersible. The submarine has the option of submerging instead of taking part in the sea combat. It can do this anytime it would otherwise make a surprise strike. As detailed in Step 2 of the General Combat Sequence, the decision is made before any dice are rolled by either side. The attacker decides first and takes effect immediately. When a submarine submerges, it is immediately removed from the battle strip and returned to the contested sea zone. However, the submarine cannot submerge if an enemy destroyer is present in the battle. Treat hostile sea zones as friendly. The submarine can move through a sea zone that contains enemy units, either in combat or non-combat movement. However, if a submarine enters a sea zone containing an enemy destroyer, it must end its movement there. If it ends its combat move in a hostile sea zone, combat will occur. Does not block enemy movement. Any sea zone that contains only enemy submarines does not stop the movement of sea units. Sea units ending their combat movement in a sea zone containing only enemy submarines can choose to attack the submarines or not. Sea units can also end their non-combat movement in a sea zone containing only enemy submarines. Cannot hit air units, whether attacking or defending. Submarines cannot hit air units. Cannot be hit by air units. Hits scored by air units cannot be assigned to attacking or defending submarines unless there is a destroyer that is friendly to the air units in the battle. Transports. Cost. 7. Attack. 0. Defense. 0. Move. 2. Unit characteristics. No combat value. A transport can attack or defend in combat, either alone or with other units, but it has attack and defense values of 0. This means that it cannot fire in the attacking or the defending unit's fire step. Transports cannot attack unless they are accompanied by at least one unit with an attack value. The exception is when they are conducting an amphibious assault from a friendly sea zone that is free of enemy submarines. Does not block enemy movement. Any sea zone that contains only enemy transports does not stop the movement of sea units. air or sea units other than transports ending their combat movement in a sea zone containing only enemy transports automatically destroy those transports. Destroying enemy transports counts as a sea combat for those sea units. Sea units can also end their non-combat movement in a sea zone containing only enemy transports. Chosen last, transports can be chosen as casualties only if there are no other eligible units. Normally this happens when only transports are left, but it can also occur under other circumstances. For example, if fighters attack the group containing only transports and submarines, the transports must take many hits because the submarines cannot be hit without a destroyer present that is friendly to the attacker. Carry land units. A transport can carry land units belonging to you or to friendly powers. Its capacity is any one land unit, plus one additional infantry. Thus, a full transport can carry a tank and an infantry or two infantry. Land units on a transport are cargo. They cannot attack or defend while at sea and are destroyed if their transport is destroyed. Loading and offloading. A transport can't load cargo from one or two territories in or adjacent to friendly sea zones that it occupies before, during, and after it moves, then offload the cargo at the end of its movement. For example, it could pick up one land unit, move one sea zone, pick up another land unit, move one more sea zone, and finally offload both land units. A transport can also remain at sea with cargo still aboard. In that case, the cargo remaining aboard must have been loaded in a previous turn, loaded this turn in the non-combat move phase, or loaded this turn for an amphibious assault from which the transport retreated. Loading onto or offloading from a transport counts as a land unit's entire move. It cannot move before loading or after offloading. Place the land units alongside the transport in the sea zone. If the transport moves in the non-combat move phase, any number of units aboard can offload into a single friendly territory. Land units belonging to friendly powers must load on their controller's turn, be carried on your turn, and offload on a later turn of their controller. This is true even if the transport remains in the same sea zone. Once a transport offloads, it cannot move again on that turn. If a transport retreats, it cannot offload that turn. A transport cannot offload units into two territories during a single turn, nor can it offload cargo onto another transport. A transport cannot load or offload while in a hostile sea zone. Remember that submarines and transports are ignored when determining whether a sea zone is hostile. A transport can't load and offload units without moving from the friendly sea zone it is in. Moving land units across a sea zone in this way is called bridging. Each such transport is still limited to its cargo capacity. It can offload in only one territory, and once it offloads, it cannot move, load, or offload again that turn. Amphibious assaults. A transport can't take part in an amphibious assault during the conduct combat phase. Doing so is the only situation in which a transport can offload cargo into a hostile territory. During an amphibious assault, a transport must either offload all units that were loaded during the combat move phase or retreat during sea combat. It can also offload any number of units owned by the transport's power that were already on board at the start of the turn.